I always thought that when my daughter became a mother, it would be the happiest day of my life. I imagined holding her hand through the nerves, sharing stories from when she was a baby, and watching her step into motherhood with the same awe and love I'd felt the day she was born. I never imagined that the journey to her baby shower would end with me standing in a parking lot, heart pounding, as security guards told me I wasn't welcome. It started with a phone call I'll never forget. "Mom, I'm pregnant!" Emily's voice was bright, trembling with excitement and a little fear. I cried happy tears, remembering the first time I held her, the way her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I promised her I'd be there for everything: doctor's appointments, nursery shopping, late-night cravings. But as the months passed, I felt her slipping away. Calls grew shorter, texts went unanswered, and when I offered to visit, she always had an excuse. "We're just so busy, Mom, maybe next month." I tried not to take it personally. I told myself she was overwhelmed, that she'd reach out when she was ready, but the ache in my chest grew heavier with every passing week. I watched her life unfold through social media, photos of her growing belly, her husband's proud smile, friends gathered around her at brunch. I liked every post, left comments full of love, but rarely got a reply. Then, one afternoon, I saw it, a photo of a pink and gold invitation, captioned, "Can't wait for my baby shower." My heart skipped. I hadn't received an invitation. I scrolled through the comments, searching for my name, but it wasn't there. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, that my invitation had gotten lost in the mail, but deep down I knew I wasn't invited. I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment I might have let her down. Was it something I said? Something I did? I called her, my voice shaking, but she didn't answer. I left a message trying to sound cheerful. "Just wanted to check in, sweetheart. I love you." No reply. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the invitation on my phone. I thought about the miles between us, 600 to be exact. I thought about the years I'd spent raising her, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd poured into every day. I couldn't understand how we'd ended up here, with silence and distance where there used to be laughter and trust. I called my sister, hoping for comfort. "Maybe she's just overwhelmed," she said gently. "Maybe she thinks she's protecting you from the stress. Or maybe she's waiting for you to make the first move." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that if I just showed up, everything would be okay. So I made a decision. I would drive the 600 miles to surprise Emily at her baby shower. I would show her that no matter what had happened, I was still her mother, and I would always be there for her. I packed a suitcase with gifts, tiny onesies, a hand-knitted blanket, a photo album of her childhood. I filled the car with gas, loaded up on snacks and coffee, and set out before dawn, my heart full of hope and nerves. The drive was long, but I barely noticed the hours passing. I replayed memories of Emily as a little girl, her first steps, her first day of school, the way she used to curl up in my lap and tell me her dreams. I imagined the look on her face when she saw me walk through the door, the tears and laughter, the way we'd hug and let go of whatever had come between us. As I got closer to her town, my excitement grew. I stopped at a florist and bought a bouquet of pink roses, her favorite. I checked the address from the invitation photo, my hands trembling as I typed it into my GPS. The baby shower was at a friend's house, a big white colonial way. The balloons tied to the mailbox and cars lining the street. I parked a few houses away, my heart pounding. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed my hair, and took a deep breath. I grabbed the gifts and the flowers, rehearsing what I'd say when I saw her. "Surprise! I couldn't stay away. I love you so much, Emily." I walked up the driveway, my legs shaking. I could hear laughter and music drifting from the backyard. I followed the sound, my heart in my throat. As I rounded the corner, I saw her, my daughter, glowing and beautiful, surrounded by friends and family. For a moment, I just watched, soaking in the sight of her happiness. Then someone noticed me. The laughter faded. Heads turned. Emily's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw something, shock, maybe even fear, before her face hardened. She walked toward me, her friends whispering behind her. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and tight. I tried to smile, to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to surprise you. I brought gifts and..." She cut me off, her eyes flashing. "You shouldn't have come. You weren't invited." The words hit me like a slap. I felt the eyes of everyone on me, the weight of their judgment. I tried to explain, to tell her how much I missed her, how much I loved her, but she shook her head. "Please leave," she said, her voice trembling. "If you don't, I'll have to call security." I stood there, frozen, as she turned away. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared, their faces blank and professional. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave the property." I nodded, numb, and let them escort me back to my car. I sat behind the wheel, the gifts and flowers still in my lap, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. The laughter and music from the backyard drifted through the open window, a cruel reminder of the celebration I was no longer welcome at. I looked down at the gifts in my lap, the tiny onesies, the hand-knitted blanket, the bouquet of pink roses, and felt a wave of humiliation so strong it made my hands shake. I had driven 600 miles for this. For a moment, I wondered if I should just drive away, leave the gifts on the passenger seat, and pretend the whole thing had never happened. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped between anger and heartbreak. I replayed Emily's words in my mind. "You shouldn't have come. You weren't invited." I tried to remember the last time we'd truly talked, the last time she'd hugged me without reservation, the last time I'd felt like her mother and not a stranger. I wondered what I had done to deserve this, what mistake I had made that was so unforgivable. I thought about calling my sister, but I was too ashamed. I didn't want to hear the pity in her voice, didn't want to explain how my own daughter had turned me away. Instead, I sat in silence, watching as guests came and went, their arms full of gifts and balloons. I wondered if any of them knew who I was, if they'd heard stories about the difficult mother, the one who couldn't take a hint. Eventually, I started the car and drove to a nearby park. I needed air, needed space to think. I found a quiet bench under a tree and sat with the gifts at my feet, the roses wilting in the afternoon sun. I watched families walk by, mothers pushing strollers, children laughing, fathers tossing frisbees, and felt a pang of envy so sharp it took my breath away. I had always imagined being part of Emily's new family, being the grandmother who baked cookies and told stories, who was there for every milestone. Now I wasn't even allowed in the door. I tried to make sense of it, to find some logic in her rejection. Had I been too controlling, too critical? Had I said something that hurt her more than I realized? I thought about the years after her father left, how I'd tried to fill both roles, how I'd sometimes been too strict, too protective. I remembered the arguments we'd had when she was a teenager, the slammed doors and angry words, but I also remembered the laughter, the late-night talks, the way she used to call me her best friend. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos, Emily as a baby, Emily at her high school graduation, Emily on her wedding day. In every picture she was smiling, her eyes bright with trust and love. I wondered when that had changed, when I had become someone she needed to keep at arm's length. As the sun began to set, I realized I couldn't go home yet. I wasn't ready to face the long drive, the questions from my sister, the emptiness of my own house. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town, the kind with faded curtains and a humming ice machine in the hallway. I laid the gifts on the bed and sat beside them, feeling more alone than I had in years. That night, I barely slept. I replayed the scene at the baby shower over and over, searching for some sign that Emily had wanted me there, some hint of regret in her eyes. But all I saw was anger, fear, and a determination to keep me out. I wondered if she would call, if she would apologize, if she would explain what had happened, but my phone stayed silent. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to try one last time. I drove to Emily's house, hoping to catch her before the day got busy. I parked down the street and waited, my heart pounding. After a while, I saw her come out to get the mail. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her belly round beneath a loose dress. For a moment, I almost called out to her, but something stopped me. I watched as she glanced around, her eyes scanning the street, and then hurried back inside. I realized then that I couldn't force my way back into her life. I couldn't make her want me there, no matter how much I loved her. I sat in the car, tears streaming dew, owned my face, and finally let myself grieve. I grieved for the daughter I had lost, for the relationship that had slipped through my fingers, for the future I had imagined but would never have. But as I sat there, I also felt something else, a flicker of resolve. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo whatever had driven us apart, but I could choose how I responded. I could choose to love her from a distance, to respect her boundaries, to hope that one day she would let me back in. I could choose to forgive her, and myself, for all the ways we had failed each other. I drove back to the motel, packed my things, and left the gifts at the front desk with a note. For Emily, with love, Mom. I asked the clerk to deliver them, hoping that even if I couldn't be there, a piece of my love would reach her. As I started the long drive home, I promised myself that I wouldn't give up. I would keep reaching out, keep loving her, keep hoping for a second chance. Because that's what mothers do, even when their hearts are broken. The highway stretched out before me, mile after mile of gray ribbon winding through fields and forests. I drove in silence, the radio off, my thoughts swirling like leaves in a storm. Every so often I'd glance at the empty passenger seat, half expecting to see Emily there, laughing at one of my old stories or rolling her eyes at my singing, but the only sound was the hum of the tires and the ache in my chest. I replayed the baby shower again and again, searching for clues. Had I missed a warning sign? Had I ignored a plea for space? I thought about the last few years, how Emily had grown more independent, how she'd started making her own choices, sometimes shutting me out in the process. I remembered the first time she told me she was moving away, how I'd tried to hide my tears, how I'd promised to visit as often as I could. I wondered if I'd held on too tight, if my love had become a weight instead of a comfort. Somewhere along the drive, I pulled into a rest stop and sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks glided across the water, their movements calm and unhurried. I envied their peace, their certainty about where they belonged. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages, hoping for a sign from Emily. Nothing. I typed out a text. I love you. I'm here when you're ready. But deleted it before sending. I didn't want to push her further away. As I sat there, an older woman joined me on the bench. She smiled, her eyes kind. "Long drive?" she asked. I nodded, surprised by the lump in my throat. I went to see my daughter. It didn't go the way I hoped. She listened as I told her the story, the words tumbling out in a rush. When I finished, she patted my hand. "Children have their own journeys," she said gently. "Sometimes they need space to figure things out. But love doesn't disappear. It waits. It forgives." Her words stayed with me as I got back in the car and continued the drive. I realized that I couldn't control Emily's choices, couldn't force her to let me in. All I could do was love her, quietly and steadfastly, from wherever I was. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house felt emptier than ever. I unpacked my suitcase, the absence of baby gifts a fresh reminder of all I'd lost. I wandered from room to room, touching the framed photos on the walls, the little mementos of Emily's childhood. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd once braided her hair and helped her with homework, and let the tears come. The days that followed were slow and heavy. I went through the motions, grocery shopping, laundry, watering the plants, but everything felt muted, as if I were living underwater. Friends called to check in, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to relive the humiliation. I wrote letters to Emily and I never sent, pouring out my love and my sorrow, hoping that somehow she could feel it across the miles. One afternoon, my sister showed up at my door, her arms full of groceries and her eyes full of concern. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me tight and started making tea. We sat together in the living room, the silence comfortable and familiar. "I know it hurts," she said finally, "but you're not alone. Families go through rough patches. Sometimes it takes time for things to heal." I nodded, grateful for her presence. "I just don't understand what I did wrong." She squeezed my hand. "Maybe it's not about what you did. Maybe it's about what Emily needs right now. Give her time. Give yourself time too. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out, one by one. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to be a good mother, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the mistakes I'd inevitably committed. I realized that motherhood wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. I decided to focus on healing myself, to find joy in the small things. I started going for walks in the mornings, breathing in the crisp air, letting the rhythm of my steps quiet my mind. I joined a local book club, rediscovering the pleasure of losing myself in a good story. I volunteered at the community center, helping new mothers who didn't have family nearby. Each act of kindness, each moment of connection, helped stitch my heart back together. But every night, before I went to bed, I whispered a prayer for Emily. I hoped she was healthy, that her pregnancy was going well, that she was surrounded by love. I hoped that one day, she would remember the bond we shared, the laughter and the tears, the way we used to be. And I promised myself that if she ever reached out, I would be ready, with open arms, an open heart, and forgiveness for both of us. Weeks passed, and the ache of rejection slowly dulled into a quiet longing. I tried to fill my days with purpose, but every so often, a memory would catch me off guard, a lullaby I used to sing to Emily, the sight of a mother and daughter laughing in the grocery store, a baby blanket in a shop window. Each reminder was bittersweet, a mix of pride for the woman my daughter was becoming and sorrow for the distance between us. One morning, as I was tending to my garden, my phone buzzed with a message. My heart leapt, hoping it was Emily, but it was a friend from the book club. She invited me to a potluck that weekend, and for a moment, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to be around people, to answer questions about my family. But then I remembered the advice from the woman at the rest stop. Love waits, but life goes on. I texted back a yes, determined to keep moving forward. At the potluck, I found myself surrounded by laughter and warmth. The women shared stories about their children, some funny, some heartbreaking, all honest. I listened, comforted by the realization that every family has its struggles, its secrets, its moments of pain. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and told them about my drive, about the baby shower, about being turned away. There were tears and hugs, and one woman squeezed my hand and said, "You're still her mother. That never changes." That night, I wrote another letter to Emily. This time, I didn't try to explain or apologize. I simply told her how much I loved her, how proud I was of her, and how I would always be here, no matter what. I sealed the letter and placed it in a drawer, unsure if I would ever send it, but comforted by the act of writing. As the days grew shorter and the air turned crisp, I threw myself into volunteering at the community center. I helped organize a support group for new mothers, many of whom were far from their own families. I listened to their fears, their hopes, their stories of loneliness and joy. I realized that, in helping them, I was also helping myself. I was reminded that motherhood is a journey, not a destination, and that every relationship has its seasons. One afternoon, a young woman in the group broke down in tears. She missed her mother, she said, but they hadn't spoken in years. She was afraid to reach out, afraid of rejection, afraid of reopening old wounds. I hugged her and told her my story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder that love can survive even the deepest hurt. Sometimes, I said, the bravest thing you can do is try again. The holidays approached, and with them, a fresh wave of loneliness. I decorated the house, baked cookies, and sent cards to friends and family. I thought about calling Emily, about sending her a gift, but I hesitated. I didn't want to intrude, didn't want to risk another rejection. Instead, I lit a candle for her every night, whispering a prayer for her happiness and health. On Christmas morning, I woke to an empty house. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the snow fall. I allowed myself to grieve, to feel the loss, but I also made a promise, to keep living, to keep loving, to keep hoping. A few days later, I received a card in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, and my hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for the gifts. The blanket is beautiful. I hope you're well. Emily." Tears filled my eyes as I read and reread the words. It wasn't an invitation, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall between us, a sign that she hadn't shut me out completely. I wrote back, keeping my message short and sweet. I'm always here for you. I love you. The new year brought a sense of renewal. I set small goals for myself, read more books, try a new recipe every week, call my sister every Sunday. I focused on gratitude, on the things I still had, rather than the things I'd lost. I found joy in the laughter of friends, in the kindness of strangers, in the quiet moments of peace that came with acceptance. But every night, before I went to sleep, I whispered Emily's name into the darkness, sending her all the love I had. I didn't know if she could feel it, didn't know if it would ever be enough to bridge the gap between us, but I hoped. And sometimes, hope is the bravest thing of all. Spring arrived with a gentle promise of new beginnings. The snow melted, crocuses pushed through the earth, and the world seemed to wake up from a long, cold sleep. I found myself waking up too, slowly, cautiously, but with a little more hope each day. I started taking longer walks, letting the sun warm my face, breathing in the scent of fresh grass and possibility. One morning, as I was returning from the market, my phone buzzed with a message. My heart skipped when I saw Emily's name. It was short, almost formal. Hope you're well. The baby is due soon. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I wanted to reply right away, to ask 100 questions, to beg for a chance to be there, but I forced myself to wait, to breathe, to respect her boundaries. After a few minutes, I wrote back, I'm so happy for you. I'm here if you need anything. I love you. I pressed send and tried not to hope for more. But the message was a lifeline, a sign that the door between us wasn't completely closed. The days passed slowly. I kept busy with volunteering, gardening, and my book club, but my thoughts always drifted back to Emily. I wondered what she was feeling, if she was scared, if she missed me, if she wished things were different. I wondered if she would call when the baby was born, if she would let me be a part of this new chapter in her life. One afternoon, as I was planting tomatoes in the garden, my sister called. You sound lighter, she said. Have you heard from Emily? I told her about the message, about the cautious hope blooming in my heart. She listened, her voice warm and encouraging. Give it time, she said. She knows you love her. That's what matters. A few weeks later, I received another message from Emily. This one was even shorter. It's a girl. We're both healthy. I burst into tears, overwhelmed with relief and joy. I wanted to rush to the hospital, to hold my granddaughter, to tell Emily how proud I was, but I knew better. I replied with all the love I could fit into a few words. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I love you both. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars, imagining Emily holding her baby, singing the same lullabies I used to sing to her. I whispered a prayer for them, for their health and happiness, for a future where we could find our way back to each other. As the weeks went by, Emily sent occasional updates, a photo of tiny fingers wrapped around hers, a blurry snapshot of the baby sleeping, a message about sleepless nights and endless feedings. Each message was a gift, a thread connecting us across the miles. I replied with encouragement, advice only when asked, and always, always love. I sent a package of gifts, soft blankets, board books, a letter for Emily telling her how much I missed her and how proud I was of the mother she was becoming. I didn't expect a reply, but a week later, I received a thank you note in Emily's handwriting. It was brief, but it was enough. Slowly, the ice between us began to thaw. Emily started calling every few weeks, her voice tired, but happy. She told me about the baby's first smile, her first bath, the way she lies ove to be rocked to sleep. I listened, offering support and laughter, careful not to push too hard. I let Emily set the pace, let her decide how much to share, how close to let me come. One day she called in tears. Mom, I'm so tired. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I felt my heart ache with love and longing. You're doing better than you think, I told her. Every mother feels that way sometimes. You're not alone. We talked for an hour, sharing stories, fears, and laughter. When we hung up, I realized that the distance between us was shrinking, that the love we shared was stronger than the pain that had come between us. I started to believe that forgiveness was possible, not just for Emily, but for myself. I forgave myself for the mistakes I'd made, for the times I'd held on too tightly, for the times I hadn't listened. I forgave Emily for her silence, for her anger, for the way she'd shut me out. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about choosing love over resentment, hope over regret. As summer approached, Emily called more often. She sent photos of the baby's first tooth, her first steps, her first birthday cake smeared across her face. Each milestone was a reminder that life goes on, that love endures, that even the deepest wounds can heal. By the time my granddaughter turned 1, the rhythm of our relationship had changed. Emily and I still weren't as close as we once were, but there was a new honesty between us, a gentle, cautious trust that grew with every call, every photo, every shared story. I learned to celebrate the small victories, a spontaneous phone call, a video of the baby's first wobbly steps, a text asking for my favorite soup recipe. Each moment was a thread, slowly weaving us back together. I found myself reflecting on the lessons of the past year. I realized that love, real love, is patient. It doesn't demand or force. It waits. It forgives. It hopes. I learned that sometimes, the best way to love someone is to give them space, to let them find their own way back. I learned that motherhood doesn't end. When your child grows up, it simply changes shape, becoming quieter, deeper, more resilient. One afternoon, as I was baking cookies for the community center, my phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was tired, but there was a softness I hadn't heard in a long time. "Mom, do you remember that blanket you made for me when I was little, the one with the yellow ducks?" I smiled, my heart swelling. "Of course, you carried it everywhere." She laughed, a sound that made me close my eyes in gratitude. "The baby loves it. She drags it around the house. I think it's her favorite thing." We talked for a while, sharing memories, laughing about the stubbornness that runs in our family. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my daughter, not just a distant adult, but the little girl I'd raised, the friend I'd missed. That call opened a new door between us. Emily started reaching out more often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to ask for advice. She sent more photos, more stories, more glimpses into her life. I learned to listen without judgment, to offer support without expectation, to love her exactly as she was. One day, she called in a panic. The baby had a fever and Emily was scared. I talked her through it, reminding her of all the times she'd been sick as a child, all the ways we'd gotten through it together. I could hear the relief in her voice, the gratitude, the trust. When the fever broke, she called to thank me. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom." Those words were a balm, healing wounds I hadn't realized were still open. I realized that, in letting go of my expectations, I had made room for something new, a relationship built on mutual respect, on forgiveness, on the quiet, steady love that endures even the hardest storms. As the months passed, Emily invited me to visit. The first time, I was nervous, unsure of how I'd be received. But when I walked through the door, she hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. The baby reached for me, her tiny hands clutching my fingers, her eyes wide with curiosity. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the weight of a year's worth of longing melt away. We spent the weekend together, cooking, laughing, sharing stories. I watched Emily with her daughter, saw the tenderness in her touch, the patience in her voice, the fierce love in her eyes. I realized that she was a wonderful mother, strong, caring, resilient. I felt a surge of pride, not just for the woman she had become, but for the journey we had taken together. Before I left, Emily pressed a photo into my hand, a picture of the three of us, smiling in the sunlight. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. I hugged her, my heart full. "Thank you for letting me back in." On the drive home, I thought about the long road that had brought us here, the miles I'd driven, the tears I'd shed, the prayers I'd whispered into the night. I realized that every moment of pain, every setback, every act of forgiveness had been worth it. I had learned that love is not always easy, not always simple, but it is always worth fighting for. I continued to volunteer, to bake cookies, to tend my garden. I found joy in the small things, in the laughter of friends, in the kindness of strangers, in the quiet moments of peace that came with acceptance. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and fear. But I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever been, that my love for Emily and for myself was unbreakable. The second year of my granddaughter's life brought a gentle, steady healing I never expected. Emily and I found a new rhythm, one that honored both our independence and our connection. We spoke often, sometimes about the baby, sometimes about nothing at all. There were still moments of awkwardness, still silences that lingered a little too long, but there was also laughter, forgiveness, and a growing sense of trust. I visited more frequently, each trip a little easier than the last. Emily welcomed me with open arms, and the baby, now a toddler, would run to greet me, her face lighting up with joy. I cherished every moment, reading stories together, baking cookies, watching Emily comfort her daughter with the same lullabies I once sang to her. I saw myself in both of them, the thread of love and resilience that bound us together. One afternoon, as we sat in the backyard watching the baby chase butterflies, Emily turned to me. "I'm sorry for how things were," she said quietly. "I was overwhelmed and I didn't know how to ask for space without hurting you. I never wanted to push you away." I reached for her hand, my heart full. "I know, sweetheart. I made mistakes too. I held on too tightly when I should have let you breathe, but I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment." She squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for coming back, for not giving up on me." We sat in silence, the sun warm on our faces, the baby's laughter ringing through the air. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness is not a single act, but a choice we make every day. It's the decision to let go of old hurts, to see each other with new eyes, to believe in the possibility of healing. As the months passed, our bond deepened. Emily invited me to more family gatherings, included me in her circle of friends, asked for my advice on everything from teething to toddler tantrums. I learned to listen more, to offer support without judgment, to trust that she knew what was best for her own family. I found joy in being a grandmother, in watching my daughter grow into a mother, in knowing that our story was still being written. I also found new purpose in my own life. I continued to volunteer at the community center, mentoring young mothers who were struggling with loneliness and doubt. I shared my story, not as a tale of heartbreak, but as a testament to the power of patience, hope, and unconditional love. I watched as women found the courage to reach out to their own families, to forgive, to try again. I realized that my pain had not been wasted. It had become a source of strength, a way to help others heal. On the anniversary of the baby shower, I drove the 600 miles again. This time, there was no fear, no anxiety, only excitement. Emily greeted me at the door, the baby in her arms, both of them smiling. The house was filled with friends and family, laughter and music, the air warm with celebration. Emily introduced me to everyone, her voice proud. "This is my mom, she drove all this way to be here." I felt tears prick my eyes as I hugged her, as I held my granddaughter close, as I realized how far we had come. The pain of that first visit was still there, a scar that would never fully fade, but it no longer defined us. We had built something stronger, something rooted in forgiveness, in understanding, in the quiet, steady work of love. That night, as I lay in the guest room, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the miles I had driven, the tears I had shed, the prayers I had whispered into the darkness. I thought about the lessons I had learned, that love is patient, that forgiveness is possible, that hope is always worth holding on to. If you are listening to my story, if you have ever felt shut out by someone you love, I want you to know this: you are not alone. Relationships are messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. But they are also resilient, capable of healing in ways you can't imagine. Don't give up. Keep loving, keep hoping, keep reaching out. Sometimes the greatest surprises come when you least expect them. I drove 600 miles to surprise my daughter at her baby shower. She called security to throw me out, but I kept loving her, kept hoping, kept believing in the power of forgiveness. And in the end, love brought us home.